Hello, BookTube. I'm a little distracted for this video. I want to say that up front just so that you're not thinking that it's you. But I'm hoping that the video itself will distract me just a bit and cheer me up, as it almost always does. So I want to read you another chapter of Mr. Scarborough's family. We have been down to the old manor house, the home of Mr. Gray, the lawyer who is taking care of Mr. Scarborough's shocking plan to announce to the world with paperwork that his eldest son is illegitimate, and that therefore the creditors who have raised huge amounts of debts with him will go for nothing. They have no claim on the estate without him. They have no claim on his brother. They have no claim on his father. If he's not legitimate, if he doesn't inherit the estate, then they don't get anything. Because this is a legal quagmire, Mr. Scarborough's lawyer, Mr. Gray, is involved, deeply involved. In fact, obsessed. And Trollope takes us down to the country, to the manor house, to see how he lives and to introduce us to his horrible in-laws, the Carroll family, and also his daughter, Dolly. And much like with Florence Montjoy in Brussels, Trollope decides to keep us here another chapter. So that's what this chapter is. This is chapter 17, Mr. Gray Dines at Home. Mr. Gray returned home in a cab on the day of Mr. Tyrwhitt's visit, not in the happiest humor. Though he had got the best of Mr. Tyrwhitt in the conversation, still the meeting which had been protracted had annoyed him. Mr. Tyrwhitt had made accusations against him personally which he knew to be false, but which, having been covered up and not expressed exactly, he had been unable to refute. A man shall tell you that you are a thief and a scoundrel in such a manner as to make it impossible for you to take him by the throat. You, of course, are not a thief and a scoundrel, he shall say to you, but shall say it in such a tone of voice as to make you understand that he conceives you to be both. We all know the parliamentary mode of giving an opponent the lie so as to make it impossible that the speaker shall interfere. Mr. Tyrwhitt had greeted Mr. Gray in the same fashion, and as Mr. Gray was irritable, thin-skinned, and irascible, and as he would brood over things of which it was quite unnecessary that a lawyer should take any cognizance, he went back home an unhappy man. Indeed, the whole Scarborough affair had been from first to last a great trouble to him. The work which he was now performing could not, he imagined, be put into his bill. To that he was supremely indifferent, but as his younger partner thought it a little hard that all the other work of the firm should be thrown on his shoulders during the period which naturally would have been his holidays, he did make his feelings intelligible to Mr. Gray. If Mr. Gray is concentrating exclusively on this one case, his partner is doing all the rest of the work. Mr. Gray, who was essentially a just man, saw that his partner was right and made offers, but he would not accede to the only proposition which his partner made. Let him go and look for a lawyer elsewhere, said his partner. They both of them knew that Mr. Scarborough had been thoroughly dishonest, but he had been an old client. His father before him had been a client of Mr. Gray's father. It was not in accordance with Mr. Gray's theory to treat the old man after this fashion, and he had taken intense interest in the matter. He had, first of all, been sure that Montjoy Scarborough was the heir, and though Montjoy Scarborough was not at all to his taste, he had been prepared to fight for him. He had now assured himself, after most laborious inquiry, that Augustus Scarborough was the heir, and although in the course of the business he had come to hate the cautious, money-loving Augustus twice worse than the gambling spendthrift Montjoy, still, in the cause of honesty and truth and justice, he fought for Augustus against the world at large, and against even the band of creditors, till the world at large and the band of creditors began to think that he was in league with Augustus, so as to be one of those who would make large sums of money out of the irregularity of the affair. This made him cross, and put him into a very bad humor as he went back to Fulham. One thing must be told of Mr. Gray, which was very much to his discredit, and which, if generally known, would have caused his clients to think him to be an unfit recipient of their family secrets. And what's his secret? He shares everything with Dolly. He told all the secrets to Dolly. He was a man who could not possibly be induced to leave his business behind him at his office. It made the chief subject of conversation when he came home. He would even call Dolly into his bedroom late at night, bringing her out of the bed for the occasion to discuss with her some points of legal strategy, of legal but still honest strategy which had just occurred to him. Maybe he had not quite seen his way as to the honesty, and he wanted Dolly's opinion on the subject. Dolly would come in her dressing gown, and sitting on his bed would discuss the matter with him as an advocate against the devil. Sometimes she would be convinced. More frequently she would hold her own. But the points which were discussed in that way, and the strength of argumentation which was used on either side, would have surprised the clients and the partner and the clerks and the eloquent barrister who was occasionally employed to support this side or the other. The eloquent barrister, or it might be the client himself, startled sometimes at the amount of enthusiasm which Mr. Grey would throw into his argument, would little dream that the very words had come from the young lady in her dressing gown. This is utterly charming. This is an utterly charming visual that Trollope is giving us of these two having these late-night conversations. To tell the truth, Miss Grey thoroughly liked these discussions, which, whether held on the lawn or in the dining-room armchairs or during the silent hours of the night, they formed indeed the very salt of her life. She felt herself to be the conscience of the firm. Her father was the reason, and the partner, in her own phraseology, was the devil. For it must be understood that Dolly Grey had a spice of fun about her, of which her father had the full advantage. She would not have called her father's partner the devil to any other ear but his, but that her father knew, understanding also the spirit which the sobriquet was applied. He did not think that his partner was worse than another man, nor did he think that his daughter thought so. The partner, whose name was Barry, was a man of average honesty, who would occasionally be surprised at the searching justness with which Mr. Grey would look into a matter after it had already been debated for a day or two in the office. But Mr. Barry, though he had the pleasure of Miss Grey's acquaintance, had no idea of the nature of the duties which she performed in the firm. "I'm nearly broken-hearted about this abominable business," said Mr. Grey as he went upstairs to his dressing-room. The normal hour for dinner was 6:30. He had arrived on this occasion at 7:30 and had paid a shilling extra to the cabman to drive him quick. The man, having a lame horse, had come very slowly, fidgeting Mr. Grey into the additional temporary discomfort. He had got his additional shilling, and Mr. Grey had only got the additional discomfort. "I declare that he is the wickedest old man the world ever produced," referring here to Mr. Scarborough. This he said as Dolly followed him upstairs, but Dolly, wiser than her father, would say nothing about the wicked old man in the servants' hearing. In 5 minutes Mr. Grey came down dressed, by the use of which word was implied the fact that he had shaken his neckcloth, washed his hands and face, and put on his slippers. It was understood in the household that though 6:30 was the hour named for dinner, 7:30 was a much more probable time. Mr. Grey pertinaciously refused to have it changed. "Stare super vias antiquas," he had stoutly said when the proposition had been made to him, by which he had intended to imply that during the last 20 years he had been compelled to dine at 6:30 instead of 6. He did not mean to be driven any further into the same direction. Consequently, his cook was compelled to prepare his dinner in such a manner that it might be eaten at 1 hour or the other, as chance would have it. The dinner passed without much conversation, other than that incidental to Mr. Grey's wants and comforts. His daughter knew that he had been at the office for 8 hours, and knew also that he was not a young man. Every kind of little cosseting was therefore applied to him. There was a pheasant for dinner, and it was essentially necessary for Dolly's opinion that he should have the first wing quite hot, and the leg also hot, and that the bread sauce should be quite hot on 2 occasions. For herself, if she had an old crow for dinner, it would have been the same thing. Tea and bread and butter were her luxuries, and her tea and bread and butter had been enjoyed 3 hours ago. "I declare, I think that after all, the leg is the better joint of the two." "Then why don't you have the 2 legs?" There would be a savor of greediness in that, though I know that a leg will go down, and I shouldn't be able to draw the comparison. I like to have them both, and I like always to be able to assert my opinion that the leg is the better joint. Now, how about the apple pudding? You said I should have an apple pudding." From which it appeared that Mr. Grey was not superior to having his dinner discussed in his presence at the breakfast table. The apple pudding came and was apparently enjoyed. A large portion of it had been put between 2 plates, meaning set aside. "That's for Mrs. Grimes," suggested Mr. Grey. "I'm not quite sure that Mrs. Grimes is worthy of it. If you knew what it was to be left without a shilling of your husband's wages, you would think yourself worthy." So it's not just Dolly who's good to the poor and the needy. And the people who benefit from Mr. Grey's generosity are not just his in-laws. When the conversation about the pudding was over, and Mr. Grey ate his cheese and then sat quite still in his armchair over the fire while the things were being taken away. "I declare I think he is the wickedest man in the world has ever produced," said Mr. Grey as soon as the door was shut, thus showing that by the repetition of the words he had used before that his mind had been intent on Mr. Scarborough rather than on the pheasant. "Why don't you have done with them?" "That's all very well, but you wouldn't have done with them if you had known them all your life." "I wouldn't spend my time and energies whitewashing any rascal. said Dolly with vigor. You don't know what you'd do. And a man isn't to be left in the lurch altogether because he's a rascal. Would you have a murderer hanged without someone to stand up for him? Yes, I would, said Dolly thoughtlessly. And he mightn't have been the murderer after all, and not legally so, which is, as far as the law goes, is the same thing. But this special question had often been discussed between them, and Mr. Gray and Dolly did not intend to be carried away by it on the present occasion. I know all about that, she said, but this isn't a case of life and death. The old man is only anxious to save his property, and throws upon you all the burden of doing it. He never agrees with you as to anything you say. Well, as to legal points he does. But he always keeps you in hot water, and puts forward so much villainy that I would have nothing further to do with him. He has been so crafty that you hardly know now which is the true heir. Oh, yes, I do, said the lawyer. I know very well, and am very sorry that it should be so. And I cannot but feel for the rascal because the dishonest effort was made on behalf of his own son. Why was it necessary? Said Dolly, with sparks flying from her eyes. Throughout, from the beginning, he has been bad. Why was the woman not his wife? Ah, indeed. But had his sin consisted only in that, I should not have dreamed of refusing my assistance as a family lawyer. All that would have gone for nothing then. When evil creeps in, said Dolly sententiously, you cannot put it right afterwards. Never mind about that. We shall never get to the end of it if you go back to Adam and Eve. People don't go back far enough. Bother, said Mr. Gray, finishing his second and last glass of port wine. Do keep yourself in some degree to the question in dispute. In advising an attorney of today as to how he is to treat a client, you can't do any good by going back to Adam and Eve. Augustus is the heir, and I am bound to protect the property for him from those money-lending harpies. The moment the breath is out of the old man's body, they will settle down upon it if we leave them an inch of ground on which to stand. Every detail of his marriage must be made as clear as daylight, and that must be done in the teeth of former false statements. As far as I can see, the money-lending harpies are the honestest lot of the people concerned. The law is not on their side. They have got no right. The estate, as a fact, will belong to Augustus the moment his father dies. Mr. Scarborough endeavored to do what he could for him whom he regarded as his eldest son. It was very wicked. He was adding a second son and a worse crime to the first. He was flying in the face of the laws of his country, but he was successful. He threw dust into my eyes because he wanted to save the property for the boy. He endeavored to make it up to the second son by saving for him a second property. He was not selfish, and I cannot but feel for him. But you say that he is the wickedest man the world ever produced, because he boasts of it all, and he cannot be got in any way to repent. He gives me his instructions as though from first to last he has been a highly honorable man and only laughs at me when I object. And yet he must know that he may die any day. He only wishes to have this matter set straight so that he may die. I could forgive him altogether if he would but once say that he was sorry for what he'd done. But he has completely the air of a fine old head of the family who thinks he will be put into marble the moment the breath is out of his body, and that he richly deserves the marble he's to be put into. That is a question between him and his God, said Dolly. He hasn't got a God. He believes only in his own reason, and is content to do so, lying there in the very brink of eternity. He's quite content with himself, because he thinks that he has not been selfish. He cares nothing that he has robbed everyone all round. He has no reverence for the property and the laws which govern it. He was born only in life interests. He is determined to treat it as though the fee simple had belonged to him. It is his utter disregard for law, for what the law has decided, which makes me declare him to be the wickedest man the world ever produced. It is his disregard for the truth which makes you think so. He cares nothing for the truth. He scorns it. He laughs at it. And yet about the little things of the world he expects his word to be taken as certainly as that of any other gentleman. I would not take it, said Dolly. Yes, you would, and be right to. If he would say that he'd pay me £100 tomorrow, or 1,000, I would have his word as soon as any man's bond. And yet he has utterly got the better of me, and made me believe that a marriage took place when there was no marriage. I think I'll have a cup of tea. You won't go to sleep, Papa? Oh, yes, I shall. When I've been so troubled, I must have a cup of tea. Mr. Gray was often troubled, and as a consequence, Dolly was called up for consultation in the middle of the night. At about 1 o'clock there came the well-known knock at Dolly's door and the usual invitation. Would she come into her father's room for a few minutes? Then her father trotted back to his bed, and Dolly, of course, followed him as soon as she had clothed herself decently. The fact is, my dear, he wants me to go down to Tretton at once. Again, I want to point out that this image of Mr. Gray cautiously knocking on his daughter's door and then hurrying back to bed so they can have a nightly discussion about the law or the ethics is delightful. Just delightful. Uh, why didn't you tell me? I thought I'd made up my mind not to go, or I thought rather that I should be able to make up my mind not to go, but it is possible that down there I may have some good effect. What does he want of you? There is a long question about raising money with which Augustus desires to buy the silence of the creditors. Could he get the money? Asked Dolly. Yes, I think he could. The property at present is altogether unembarrassed, meaning it has no debts. To give Mr. Scarborough his due, he has never put his name to a scrap of paper, nor has he had occasion to do so. The Tretton pottery people want more land, or rather more water, and a large sum of money will be forthcoming. But he doesn't see the necessity of giving Mr. Tyrwhitt a penny piece, or certainly Mr. Hart. He would send them away howling without a scruple. Now Augustus is anxious to settle with them for some reason which I do not clearly understand, but he wishes to do so without any interference on his father's part. In fact, he and his father have very different ideas as to the property. The squire regards it as his, but Augustus thinks that any day might make it his own. In fact, they are on the verge of quarreling. So, are we following? We're following what's going on here. Mr. Scarborough is saying the creditors can go howl into the wind. But Augustus Scarborough is wondering if it might be possible to raise enough money to pay them off. Not completely. They all know that if they don't get something from Augustus Scarborough now, they'll get nothing, because they'll never get anything from Montjoy Scarborough. So it might be possible that they will settle for a lot less than what they're owed, with documentation, so that they can't come back later and say they want more. Then, after a long debate, Dolly consented that her father should go down to Tretton and act, if possible, the part of peacemaker. So that is chapter 17, where we just get a little bit more of this wonderful arrangement in the Gray home down at Fulham, and a little bit more about Dolly Gray, who is, we find, in many ways, the moral conscience of her father and his law firm. I think it's just charming, this little family vignette that's happening every night. That's going to be it for this chapter. So we'll move on next time. We're still staying at Fulham. We're still staying down at the old manor house. I don't think any of you are complaining. This is pretty interesting stuff. So you can imagine that we will follow Mr. Gray to Tretton Park in due course, but not right away. So I'll wrap this up for now, and we'll read the next chapter next time. Thank you, BookTube.